Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, to council members, state policymakers and team members and members of the public. I want to apologize for the delay in starting this meeting and the confusion around gaining access to it. There was an issue with the link that had been posted in the meeting agenda. And so please accept my sincerest apologies. And I hope that everyone who wants to watch this or participate or be part of this meeting is now in here, and encourage folks to forward the link to those who may not have it. I'd like to call the July meeting of the Social Equity Council to order. Councilwoman Alverio is unable to join us this morning, and Councilman Walton, I believe, may arrive later if he's not here already, but I know he cannot stay for the entire meeting. And for that reason, I'm going to ask the council's grace to move the executive director's report to after the vote on the Section 149 applications. At this point, I will call the roll. Councilman Arroyo, Councilman Betts.
Here.
I am here. Councilman Gaddis.
Here.
Councilwoman Gordon.
Here.
Councilman Jefferson. Councilman Lehman. Councilwoman Name. Councilman Pelka.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Shaw.
Present.
Councilman Shirley.
Here.
Councilwoman Valeries. She just sent a note saying that she's in the attendee list. So if we can move her over and also check to see if other members of the council have been placed there in error. Councilman Walton. I'm just going to check the participant list to see.
Andrea, it's David Lehman. I'm here. Sorry, I was on the public webinar before, but I'm here. It's David
Okay.
Lehman.
Okay, great.
Same
Thank
as
you.
Ojala here as well. Same.
Terrific. I believe that is all. So we have
Councilman Jefferson is also in the public. He needs to be brought back over.
Just give it 1 minute for those folks to be moved over. Councilman Pelka is also in the attendee area.
I was just promoted to a panelist, so I'm here.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. Can we move Councilman Pelka?
If Councilman Pelka could raise his hand, we'd be able to identify him quickly.
I believe he had raised his hand. He says he's raising his hand.
I'm wondering if he's somehow used Crystal's link.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all again. Today is a day of significant importance for this council. Our actions today will be transformative for social equity applicants, but more importantly, will bring change to communities most harmed by the war on drugs through employment and community reinvestment. I want to thank my council colleagues, the SEC team, and Cone Resnick for their extraordinary efforts to ensure that this process was done with fidelity and purpose. I also want to thank Governor Lamont, our legislative leaders, advocates, and community stakeholders for their feedback on and support of our work, as well as the teams at DECD and DCP. Today, the council will take action on the applications received for cultivation in disproportionately impacted areas. These applications were slated for review first in recognition of the time required to grow and process the plant, as well as the need to identify space that is suitable for this endeavor. Other license types, both through the lottery and equity joint ventures, will be considered in future meetings. Following the vote, the SEC team will send a communication to all applicants notifying them of their determination. Approved applicants will subsequently be contacted by the DCP regarding next steps. Per the statutes, applicants who were not approved have the option to appeal their decision to the Superior Court. We recognize this will be a life-changing decision for those approved applicants. We also know that those who were not approved will be profoundly disappointed, particularly because this was a one-time opportunity. Our goal was and is to affirm that social equity applicants were true owners of their businesses, as promoting equity in the cannabis industry is our primary charge. And while this window of opportunity is closed, we hope social equity applicants will consider applying for licenses in future lotteries. At this time, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the June meeting.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Second.
Councilwoman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The draft minutes don't reflect the Finance Committee report that was provided at the June meeting. It was a report of the Finance Committee meeting of May 19th. I have draft minutes that I have conveyed to SEC staff. So the substance that was reported to this council in June was that the committee decided to move to a quarterly schedule for meetings or on an as-needed basis. And so I felt that's important to ensure that the minutes reflect not only that there was a report from the Finance Committee, but that the frequency of the meetings will change.
So can we, are you suggesting an amendment to the minutes to reflect what you've just said? I believe that Crystal had updated those minutes and she indicated she was going to send them to the full council. If that has not yet been done, we can amend this motion to approve the minutes, excuse me, as changed, as with the suggested changes as you've indicated.
Thank you. I have not received revised minutes and they were not included in the agenda materials for today's meeting. So I would recommend that the minutes be amended as I've described.
Yes.
And then this body can act on my suggested amendment.
Okay, great. May I have a, so the motion would be to accept the minutes as amended based on Councilwoman Shaw's comments.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Now we will turn to the approval for the Section 149 applications. We are joined today by Jeffrey Magan from Cone Resnick, and I don't see Sarona here, so I will turn it over to you, Jeff, to set the frame for, oh, there's Sarona. Good morning. I'll turn it over to them to set the frame for our consideration.
Good morning, and thank you very much. We performed a review of the Section 149 applications. As such, there were 16 that we have recommended for approval and have provided the ADR reports. With those applications, based upon a review of the documentation provided, we could make a reasonable determination that they met the criteria as prescribed by the council in terms of residency, income, and ownership and control. So we do have put those forward for your review and subsequent approval.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the recommendation for the 16 social equity cultivators.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Councilwoman Shaw, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. To better understand these recommendations for approval, is there a way in which we can see how what the geographic distribution is of perhaps the applicants, or where these applicants have indicated they intended to establish their sites?
So I'm happy to provide the overview. The geography is based on residents. The cultivators will have to have their establishment in a disproportionately impacted area, but they did not have to provide where they plan to locate at the onset. But as in terms of the approved social equity applicants, we have 2, and Jeff and Serona, correct me if I slip. 2 out of Bridgeport, 5 out of Hartford, 1 from Manchester, 1 from Middletown, 3 from New Britain, 1 from Southington, 1 from Stamford, and 2 from Waterbury.
And I believe, Andrea, that was based on the information Ray provided coming out of our meeting yesterday.
Yes.
With those, yeah, correct.
Thank you. Would it be possible to get that kind of, I mean, it would be helpful to see that on a map so that we can get a sense of the concentration. I mean, I appreciate you providing the addresses of the applicants, but it just helped to kind of get a sense of where these applications are coming from.
Yeah, that's something that we can definitely deliver. While discussion is going on right now, we do have the applications and their addresses, zip codes, etc. I do have a rudimentary map, but let me refine that a little bit and I can provide it based on the particular you're asking for.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gordon?
Morning, everyone. So I have a few questions, and I think they might be I think they're going to probably go to Cohen Resnick. So the summaries that were provided gave us, I think, some information on all of the applications, and I went through all of them in detail. And I 100% understand the income and residency, like those reasons why those are not approved was like black and white. They were not, in the right areas. However, I have a few questions about the ownership and control and how those determinations were made. It seems like for many of the applicants, it was a lack of clarity or a lack of information, and as the chair of this committee said on the outset, this is like life-changing. This is a huge deal, and these are big decisions that we're making today. And I 100% understand that the legislation was flawed, was broken in many different ways. However, I think we do have an opportunity to do this right. And I think for a number of reasons, I would love to understand if there was ambiguity and I say this just based on everything in history tells us when there's gray area, it often does not end in the best interest for communities of color. So for places where there was ambiguity on whatever it was, I'm just interested to know what the process was there and how those determinations were made, because I think of 40 something applicants, we are, however many we are approving, it just, I think it doesn't sit right with me. I'm going to be 100% honest. And we, as I said, there was no interview process. So there wasn't, applicants weren't given the opportunity to come back and say, that's not exactly what I meant. It's all based on what was written on paper. And it just, I don't know, I slept on this. I've been thinking about this. It's just been like riding my mind since we got all of this information. So I just love to understand that a little bit more about your process around ownership and control.
So Councilwoman Gordon, if I may, if we can delay that part of the conversation to the vote where denials are being issued, because this particular vote is around approvals. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wait, what is the motion that we're voting on again?
The motion, yes, is approval of those 16 social equity cultivators that have been recommended for approval.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you so much. I will now entertain a motion. Someone has their hand up. The Social Equity Council, it says.
It's just me, Andrea. We're having a bit of a problem. Keep going. It's me.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve the recommendations for the 25 applicants who did not meet the social equity criteria.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Great. Jeff, I'm turning it over to you to respond for Councilwoman Gordon's question.
Sure. So when we performed our review, again, and to your point, it was based upon a couple of criteria. First of all was the definition of ownership and control that we received. And I believe that was crafted after some public comment. Komla, as in regards to that, I would defer to you, but in short, we were looking at the definition as, ownership and control is the 65%. Ownership means a stake in the possession of equity in the capital, shares, stocks, assets, or profits held in a cannabis business by a social equity applicant, and control, where such, the social equity applicant exercises operational authority over the daily affairs of the business and has the voting power to direct management, agents, and policy and beneficial interests of the business to that 65%. And so with that in mind, we reviewed that in line with the organizational charts that were provided to us and really used that as a starting point. In many cases, we did see that there was, a 65% ownership and control indicated within the organizational chart. However, in addition, we also looked at the operation and management agreements to see how that ownership and control was being delegated through those various agreements. In many cases, while we were looking at those, it did not appear to us in reading through those. In some cases, it was ambiguous. It did not provide that definition. The management and operating agreements may not, they could have conflicted with the organizational chart, just in how those agreements played out. And so in those cases, and in those cases where it was ambiguous and we could not, with definite support and reliability, make that recommendation. So in those cases, we did deny that aspect of ownership and control. And to the point of the review, we reviewed in totality the information that was provided to us. So there was, in some cases, conflicting information, whereas it said there was a certain ownership stake according to the organizational chart. However, based on any management agreements, operating agreements, and in some cases, other consulting or other management agreements, that was not the case. And so in terms of doing our own due diligence, if there were conflicts, we tended to rely upon those signed agreements in making our determination. I hope that clarifies a little bit in the process that we took to review these.
It doesn't necessarily mean that I like it. Madam Chair, I know there's a motion on the floor, and Councilwoman Shaw will probably help me make my clarification about what we need to do here. I would feel a lot more comfortable if we were able to pull out the applications that were denied based on income and residency, separate from the ones that were based on ownership and control for a vote of denial. That I think personally would, and I don't know if I'm asking, I don't know what the rules are for how to do that, but I'd like to see if that, sorry, I don't know what I'm necessarily asking. I'd like to see if we could split those out because I think they're just very separate conversations, and black and white around income and residency and ownership and control are different. And I don't want to make a decision on all of them based on
Sure.
my hesitancy over one section versus the other. So.
Okay, absolutely. I believe it was Councilman Jefferson who moved the motion. I asked him to rescind his motion.
Or accept a friendly amendment.
Okay, that works too. Councilman Jefferson, I don't see him, but if he's on, Councilman Jefferson, are you open to a friendly amendment to the motion to vote on the applications that were?
He was kicked out of the room. He just texted me, he's not in here anymore.
Okay, so.
While we await, may I ask another question?
Sure.
And it relates to some of the topics Ms. Gordon brought up. So I'm curious to know if the concepts of ownership and control were considered together, or whether the ownership requirement and the 65% was considered separate and apart from whether there was control. And the reason why I ask is that there could be a structure, I can envision a structure where there's the requisite 65% ownership stake, but that there could be a board structure where one member has 51% of the voting, shares, or there's another mechanism such that it may be less than the 65%, but it's still control.
I'm sorry. So when we did review ownership and control, we took a look at those together. So those were contained within the operation and management agreements. So in our consideration of looking at the supporting agreements, looking at in many, I think a majority, if not all of the cases, the ownership and control was initially demonstrated by the organizational chart that was provided with the supporting management and operating agreements.
So did you, if I may follow up, so did you evaluate any structures where it was along the lines of what I described in the hypothetical? In other words, where the control interests were different than the ownership interests?
Generally, if we found, any discrepancies there, we would have noted them. However, for the purposes of, determining whether or not ownership and control was maintained, we looked at that holistically.
All right. Well, I do look forward to the discussion of the focused discussion on ownership and control, which I anticipate will happen when we consider those in isolation, because I do think that is the most challenging aspect of our review right now. Thank you.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. All righty, so I'm going to ask Jeff and Sabrina if we can consider the residency the applicants who did not meet that residency criteria first. Did we want additional context on that, or do we want because the motion, I'll be honest, is a little confusing to me because I don't know which order we're supposed to take things in, as opposed to having a brand new motion.
And Madam Chair, if I may clarify, as I'm looking at these, I think in many cases, those that failed, if we take a look at the ones that failed due to ownership and control, I think many of them also failed for another criteria. And so in many cases, it wasn't just one criteria that was failing, it was multiple. So they could have passed residency, they could have passed, and failed ownership and control and failed income determination. I don't think you're going to find very many that, only failed ownership and control. Let me see if I take a look. There's a few, excuse me.
No, and I think that's why I wanted to separate them out, because I think it was there were a small amount. So, and I think instead my intent was to have a conversation on those few and not necessarily have a conversation about, I think that was my intent, just to clarify about, because it was not, it's not like 40 or 30 that we're talking about. It's just a small number of them, which was my intent in separating them out.
It's about 5.
Yeah.
So there were 9 that were recommended for denial that passed the ownership and control portion. Those same ones also passed the income portion. However, they did fail the residency determination. So I just do want to put that out there. The remaining ones failed the ownership and control aspect, and it was intermittent whether or not they passed the other 2 criteria. I think in many cases, it looks like there was only one that failed residency and passed income. So many of the other ones failed both, ownership, it also failed residency and also failed income determinations. So depending on what criteria you want to look at, I can parse out and tell you how many there were for each category. Sorry, I just wanted to make that hopefully clarification.
So let me clarify what I'm saying. Is it possible for us to vote on, because I think, or maybe we're discussing what the vote would be, but the only application that I think, and Councilwoman Shaw probably is in the same position, we're trying to have a discussion on the ones that failed solely on ownership and control. If it was residency and ownership and control, and the applications are, numbered, so maybe we could just vote on the numbers excluding the ones that failed only on ownership and control, so just to make the process work a little better, and we don't necessarily have to go over everything. And if we need a second to do that, I'd be happy to pause for a second, because I think there's other questions that are being asked, but that's the conversation I am looking to have at this moment. So not residency was also an issue and income was also an issue. That's fine. I think for transparency, I think it's just worth it. And I think this is probably the only time that this conversation is going to happen. I'd like to just have it all in the open about the why, and then we can just move on. And I think that'll help me determine, am I an up vote or a down vote? But I'm perfectly fine on everything else. These are just the only application that I have a few questions about. So I think that's just for clarity, that's what I'm asking. only the ones, and I'm sure there's got to be people on this call who can just pull out those numbers based on the applications. And we can just only have that discussion on the, I believe it's 5 to Councilman Jefferson's point, if I counted correctly, and I could be wrong, but I believe it was 4 or 5 to when I checked.
I have 8 here that appear to have passed the other 2 criteria and have only failed ownership and control.
So then it's the 8.
Councilman Jefferson?
So we're looking at those who failed, who passed income and residency, but failed on ownership and control.
Correct. There were 8 that I had
Okay.
marked for
All right,
that.
that's a different number. Okay, I just want to be clear what we're looking at. Okay.
Councilman Shirley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to follow up on something that Councilwoman Shaw made reference to, I think, and this is a question for Jeffrey, I believe. Would it be fair to say, Jeffrey, that with regard to ownership and control, the areas of conflict, if you will, that we had was in the control area. The 65% ownership did not seem to be problematic between the backers and the social equity applicants. What did seem to be an issue was if and when that 65% also translated to 65% in terms of control.
Yeah,
there fair statement.
Yeah, there were many cases where we had reservations based upon the language within the operating and management agreements that while on the surface it had indicated 65% at least ownership and control, in reality it was not such.
Yeah, that was my sense when I went through the document. When I went through the documents of those that were declined.
So, Madam Chair, through you, I just do have one question, and I hear, and I thank Kaiser and Regnick for the work that they're doing. But when there's a gray area, I think that's when, for me, that's when a red flag comes up, right? When you're saying it's not clear, we don't know which way, right? And so, with that being said, just as that part of it, when you're saying it's ambiguity that's in play, that's a problem for
me. And if I may note in that case, if clarity was missing, we did not feel it was our place to, if documentation and support was not provided to us where we could make a reasonable determination, we felt that it was outside of our jurisdiction, power, whatever you want to call it. It was not our place to do so. We don't know what their intent may have been, or how they had felt that it would function. We did our reviews solely based upon the documentation provided, and made our recommendations based on that. So in those cases where there was that ambiguity, where there was not supporting documentation to make a reasonable explanation or determination, again, we felt that it was not our place to do so, to elaborate with no support.
But you felt it was your place to deny it, so that's a problem for me, right? If you felt it's your place to deny, but not that's an issue.
We denied it because it did not provide the clarity to warrant an approval. There was nothing there to suggest that they had met it. Therefore, they would have not met it and thus had been subject to a denial.
It wasn't a suggestion that they did though. So is that gray area?
I think the default is if they are not providing information to demonstrate that they have met the criteria, the operating, assumption is that they have not met it. They have to prove to the council that they have met that criteria. And based upon the documentation that they provided, they did not meet that burden of proof to show that they, warranted a recommendation for approval.
So this is just my opinion. When there's any gray area, we approve them and let them go all the way through the process and let us handle it when it's really for them to get their license.
So the subject of our review was just to determine whether or not and make a recommendation to the council as to whether or not the information they provided met the criteria set forth by the council to warrant an approval of their social equity status, not necessarily, a license in general. So as we're looking at their social equity status, the information, the documentation, the support that they provided does not provide enough, for a reasonable determination that they have met that burden of proof to meet the criteria set forth by the council.
That's a little contradicting to me though, because you're saying it doesn't, right? But then you're making the decision. So which one is it?
I think
If I could just ask for a clarification, I don't think Cone Resnick is making a decision on who is being approved or denied. They're making a recommendation. I think the decision sits with the council, and I think that's why Councilman Gordon and what she recommended in terms of let's take out the ones that we have some of this gray area in and let's discuss them individually. That's where our role comes in. So I would not be in favor of just saying let's just approve them even though there's gray area. I think it warrants discussion, and I think that's the road that we're trying to go down right now. But please clarify if I'm wrong in reading that.
Again, I would say on our part, it is to make a recommendation to this council. We reviewed the documentation was provided. Upon that review, we felt that the burden of proof to meet the criteria, to demonstrate having met that criteria was not there. And that's why we made our recommendation to you. As such, it is a recommendation to the council.
Councilman Jefferson?
I just want to be clear, your assessment, your vetting of these applicants was based solely on the criteria that you had before you. Am I correct?
That is correct. We did not, expand or extrapolate. We used the criteria that was set forth by the council, reviewed the documentation in line with that criteria, and whether or not it met the burden of proof that a reasonable person could make a determination is how we arrived at our recommendation.
Thank you.
Councilman Shirley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeffrey, I think it might be helpful if you gave us an example of a denial in what was a gray area. Because what I'm thinking is in some cases, it was not gray. In some cases with ownership and control, ownership was 65%, but voting was 33%. So that's clear. That's not control. So there's nothing gray about that. But give us an example of what something that you found to be a gray area.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to think right off the top
I know
of my head from
a lot, I'm sure.
these applications. There were some cases where there were additional agreements that took that control further out of the hands of the social equity applicant. In some cases, there were multiple operating agreements, management agreements, consulting agreements. And as we looked through them, we saw in some cases where they may have conflicted. And as such, we would take the ones that we would take a look at the agreements that demonstrated how the control would be handled. So in some cases, one agreement may say 65%, control, and another agreement may have said, you have that control. However, for XYZ type of daily operations, you only have a 20% control or something of that nature. Again, that is not a definite example. I'm just providing a kind of an extrapolation of some of the things we saw.
But yeah, and it was clear that in some areas, even though the social equity applicant owns 65% of the business, their voting on decision-making differed from depending on how much capital was involved. They could make, as I recall, that was one that you denied because they actually did not have control throughout. It wasn't consistent throughout the agreement.
That is correct.
So I think it might be helpful, I think, to give us an idea of what you're defining as gray, because it sounds to me that you're not saying that it was not you did not understand it. That's not what I hear you saying. What I hear you saying, what you're calling gray, I might call a conflict.
Yeah, and there were some cases where there may have been a conflict, and so we looked at it in terms of the social equity applicant and what their place within the business would be, and if it did not appear to if it appeared against the social equity applicant's interests in terms of maintaining that 65% ownership and control, we generally looked at it in that light. So to your point, there were some, and again, there were in many cases multiple management and operating agreements and various other sorts of agreements that may have conflicted. So in looking at those and in examining them in their totality, we look to see, are there areas in which the social equity applicant is being put at their 65% ownership and control stake is being put at a disadvantage and not actually reflective of 65% ownership and control. So, it could say one thing in the umbrella operating agreement. There could be a sub agreement or a sub clause down the line that further restricted that, in which case, we tended to examine that because there was more specificity there that elaborated upon that umbrella operating and control agreement, if you will. So as we look down the line in the various agreements that were associated with it, either through reference or also contained within the application, we examined those as well. So I think the best example there is the umbrella agreement may at the top say 65% ownership and control, and then a related agreement, a related clause, a sub clause might come in and say, well, in the case of XYZ, which we considered just daily control and ownership type of activities, it would further restrict it and say you only have a 20% vote or something of that nature. So in that case, because there was that ambiguity there and it was a further specified restriction, we felt that it wasn't meeting the definition of ownership and control, and therefore denied it for that reason. I hope that helps to kind of paint a picture there.
I think it makes it a little clearer. Thank you, though. That's appreciated.
Additional questions?
I do have just, so Madam Chair, through you, I just need to know, so what are we voting on now? Because I don't think it would be fair where there's any ambiguity that we should be voting where it's not clear. Not when this is people's livelihood, not when we're talking about making sure we're helping those who have been affected by the war on drugs. Who's to say that this right here isn't one of those individuals? So I refuse to have this go through and we just don't know, right? It's that gray area. And once you start talking about gray area, it's either if it looked like a duck and it sound like a duck, it's a duck. But right here, we don't have that. And I don't feel comfortable with anything that has to have a question on if it's clear or not to be voting on that.
So Councilman Betts, you are certainly within your rights to vote, to not vote in the affirmative. And, you know, that's when it comes time for a vote, then you can exercise that right. Further discussion?
So just clarity on what we're voting on, because this is what I thought we were voting on. We're making the vote to deny the applications that were denied based on a number of reasons, and we're not denying the ones that were based solely on ownership and control, because we'd like to have a separate vote on those applicants. So the denials, like in ownership and control and residency, ownership and control, and that's why I was asking if somebody could provide clarity on the application numbers, so there's a record of exactly what we're voting on, so we know. I think we've had a long enough discussion that someone might be able to tell us we're voting on applications 1 through whatever. And that was just to understand, that's what I thought we were voting on. Which
is why I suggested at the beginning that the motion itself be rescinded so that we could issue a motion that provided clarity on exactly what this body would like to consider. So I will go back and ask Councilman Jefferson if he will rescind his motion.
I have no problem rescinding my motion. I thought we made a friendly amendment and I thought we were excluding the 8 that fell into that category. But if you want to, through you, Madam Chair, I rescind my motion and someone can make a new motion.
I'd prefer a clean process. You know, I just prefer clarity for all parties involved.
Not a problem.
I'll give you a clean process. I'm ready to vote on everything. I'll give you a nice big jumbo motion. I'm just joking, Madam Chairwoman. I'm ready to go. So you let me know when you're ready. I'm a yes. Let's go.
Thank you, Councilman Gaddis. So let me try this again. May I entertain a motion to consider or to approve the recommendations by Cohn-Resnick for those applications that were denied solely on the basis of ownership and control? Councilwoman Gordon, did I get that right? No.
No.
Okay.
She wants to exclude.
Does someone want to state the motion? Pardon?
I'd like to give it a try.
I think I want to point to Councilwoman Shaw. I think she's going to do this better than I will.
By all means, have at it.
I move that the council deny the applications that Cohn-Resnick evaluated and recommended for denial, to the extent that the denials or the recommendations were based on insufficient or for failure to meet the requirements related to residency and or income requirements.
So move.
Was that?
Second.
Did that capture it, Ms. Gordon?
Yes.
Yes.
So the difference is that we are acting to deny. We're not approving a recommendation to deny. We're denying.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Right, so we're gonna we're voting on denying all but the 8 that falls into the category previously discussed.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And we'll have a separate vote on that, Madam Chair, through you. I just want to be clear where we're going after we vote on this. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Great. Councilwoman Shaw, would you like to state the second motion?
I move that this council deny the applications that were evaluated by Cone Resnick and determined to be insufficient on the basis of ownership and control as the sole grounds for denial of the application.
May I have a second?
I second that.
Discussion.
Okay.
One of my concerns, Madam Chair, from the very beginning, from the outset, was the idea that we can have sham sort of companies, front individuals for, individuals who have the resources to create an entity in the cannabis industry. And I was very, very concerned about this from the get-go, the minute I was appointed to this council. And I think that's important. I think, what we gave Cone Resnick the task to do is to vet that income, residency, ownership, and control. Ownership and control is the bottom line. And that was their task. That was their challenge. And I accept their explanation for each one. I went through every one, and I accept their recommendation and basically what they stated in summarizing their reasoning for recommending that those applicants be denied. That's very important for us because I think that's the concern for the entire community. Who's actually running the store? Who's actually operating these establishments? And we established the criteria, and they simply followed the criteria. And that's where we land. And it's not going to make folks happy, but these are the folks we gave the task to. We voted on it. And these are their recommendations.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. Councilman Lehman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I vehemently concur with Councilman Jefferson. These aren't easy decisions, but they're decisions nonetheless that we need to make. And I share the concerns Councilman Jefferson just made in terms of folks potentially taking advantage of social equity applicants in the construct of these businesses and how control and ownership works. So I just wanted to make sure my voice was known, and I concur with Councilman Jefferson and everything he said.
Thank you, Councilman Lehman. Councilman Betts.
I have to say that it is evident, right, from what Cone and Resnick and what they have done, right, and most applicants that have been rejected because of the issue of ownership and control. Like, I am in full support of what Councilman Jefferson and Lehman has says, as far as, having those individuals coming and taking advantage of individuals. But my concern is when there's a gray area and when there's ambiguous things that are being mentioned and making these decisions, we have to be very careful in doing that, to making sure that everybody is getting the fair share and deal with things. And it's not gray, it's black or white. Now, when things are black and white, I'm all for that. But when there's gray, that's an issue for me.
Thank you. Councilman Shirley.
I just want to say I want to give Cone Resnick his kudos for the extraordinary amount of work they did, particularly in this area of ownership and control. I mean, I think we knew from the outset that this would be a difficult area, very complex. There would be really sophisticated people looking at ways to organize their companies in a way that they would find comfortable. And I think in some cases, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing backers saying, this is the condition under which I'm going to invest in this company. And these are the terms, these are the management agreements. And if it gets rejected, well, okay, because I'm not going to invest in any other way. That's my suspicion. That does not, I don't think that addresses Councilman Bett's issues of gray, because it is gray. But I think in some cases, we're seeing backers telling us under what conditions they are willing to do the investment. So,
Thank you, Councilman.
and we're not
Shirley.
accepting it, right? So.
Thank you, Councilman Shirley. Councilwoman Gordon?
Yeah, so I think I want to align my comments with both Councilman Jefferson and Councilman Betts. I think when we came into this in the beginning, I was equally worried and concerned about, companies taking advantage of social equity applicants. What I think is a little concerning to me upon the conversation today was and this is not it's not the role of Cohen Resnick to make the decision. I think it's the ownership of the council to make the decision. But it seems as if there were questions, and the statute, I think I had to double check, was not clear on 65% ownership, 65% control. It was 65% ownership and control. So that ambiguity in the beginning has created a space for ambiguity, I think, in just how things were presented. And I'm still trying to figure out what the right thing to do here is. And I don't know if I'm necessarily comfortable doing an up or down vote saying yes or no. I think, but that's what's in front of us here right now. And I guess I've been thinking about, is it possible to hold? And I don't know based on the statute and what the ability is to do here, but it feels like if there were questions or things just didn't really seem to add up, we're moving and we're like erring on the side of denial, not an approval. And I guess from my perspective, the flip could also happen where a person with a savvy attorney could be able to fix all the agreements to make it look pretty and go through our process. And the person who actually is a social equity applicant didn't have a fancy attorney, but is also going to be the person who is running the business day to day, but that just was not be able to be reflected on paper for a number of reasons. So that is just, I think, where I am a little stuck. And I'm not trying to hold the process up. I want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence, but because it's so few, I don't even know what our options are. Is if we could hold for further review, could we interview? But if I am not okay. I'm nervous I am not okay voting in the side of denial based on ambiguity. And I think to Councilman Shirley's point, it's like some of these are like flat out no. Like when you look at it, you can see that this was an up or down. But I think the way the questions were answered did not give me enough clarity to say, well, this clearly was a sham. It was like, well, one paper said this, one paper said something else. So that's just where my pause is, because I want to make sure we're doing due diligence to the communities that have been most harmed by the war on drugs. But I also think it's up to the council. That's those of us who've been appointed to make this decision, to make the right decisions. And this is not approving this approving this application does not equal a license. Approving this application moves it forward. So DCP then makes the determinations about all the things. But saying no right now shuts down the conversation today. And I think that is what I am most concerned about. There are lots of different checks and balances after today that allow many people to look at everything and say, nope, that clearly did not meet the criteria for licensure. So I think that's where I am. I don't think I'm okay closing the door on those folks there where there's ambiguity today. So I just wanted to state that I don't necessarily need to talk about this to the end, but I think that's what I would like to see happen is somebody else can ask the questions and do all the things that are necessary for licensure and make the determination if they get a license or not post today's meeting.
So Councilwoman Gordon, a couple of things. First, we have an opinion from the Attorney General that says that the SEC does not have the legal authority to create a policy exception that would allow licensed applicants to correct deficiencies in their application. The second thing is, this isn't the end of the conversation. As I stated at the beginning of the meeting, folks who are denied do have the opportunity for remedy by going through the Superior Court. I respect completely your stance, but I did want to just clarify, A, what we have the ability to do, and two, the options for remedy for those who are denied or deemed not to have met the social equity criteria.
So can I just ask a quick question, Chairwoman? So
sure.
Based on, I totally understand, we can't change the rules midway. Granted, I love to change the rules, but is my assumption correct? Where if we approve them today, this is by no means gets them licensure. What it does is moves them forward in the process, and then DCP then does the due diligence by reviewing all the stuff and determining whether they get full licensure or not. I just want to make clarity that that's the determination that we're making today.
That's correct. What the council is responsible for is verifying that a social equity applicant is in fact a social equity applicant, or social equity backer is in fact a social equity backer. So that is the charge for us. DCP's charge is to then verify, conduct the background checks, do all of the sort of buttoning up, if you will, and awarding the license after that fact.
I'm sorry to jump in. Could you just clarify though, DCP will not be checking anything related to ownership and control?
No.
Correct. So the decision we make, there won't, as far as ownership and control goes, that is not going to be under scrutiny under DCP. All the rest of the kind of licensing process and procedures will be. So to some extent, while this might be the sort of, there's more opportunities to check things, the things that we're looking at today will not be coming up with DCP for review.
That's correct. Councilwoman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious to know if counsel to the council or the attorney for the council can comment on the aspect of the law which relates to ownership and control. My reading is that the ownership requirement is 65%. There's a separate requirement regarding control. 65% does not modify control. So in other words, I look at the two concepts of ownership and control separately. And I think that is the ambiguity. And if we can resolve through this discussion for purposes of Mr. Bett's comments, I think that would shed a lot of light on the gray area that we've been discussing. So if I can direct that question to Attorney Matrivi, how he interprets the ownership and control provisions of the law.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilmember Shaw, for directing the question over. On the concept of ownership and control, the way it is phrased in the Public Act 21-1, it goes together. It's ownership and control. And when the Social Equity Council, first through the Policy Committee in April, and then second through the council itself, approved the definition and the package, the review system that Resnick is using to review the applications, that was incorporated. And it was incorporated word for word in the review package that we'll be sharing with the public. And all members of the public knew about this before they submitted their ownership and control document. So to expand on what we've seen, because I've seen very closely the work that Resnick has done, some of the things we see, I've heard a lot of the word ambiguity today. It's not more about ambiguity. What we've seen through the review. Through the review is the contradiction. Applicants submit several documents in most cases, and sometimes they will submit an operating agreement. And in addition to the operating agreement, they will have an additional consulting agreement with the same backer or with another backer. And in one document, it will say the social equity applicant has everything as the council indicated. However, in additional document, it basically takes away the ownership and sometimes the control of the social equity applicant. To give you an example, there are applications where there were provisions such as the social equity applicant may be removed entirely from the management system of the entity. I don't think that's what the legislature had in mind when they passed the Responsible Act. So the work the Cohen Resnick has done has focused on the definitions uh, based on the statute. And this definition and the entire process has already been approved by the Social Equity Council. Today, all the council is doing is to make sure that indeed they did it based on the criteria that the council has agreed in first place. Now, naturally, those who will be denied by the council, as the Madam Chair pointed out, they have recourse. They can appeal within 30 days at the Superior Court, and a judge will hear it and then make determinations on it. That is the alternative to this situation here today. Through you, Madam Chair.
You, Madam Chair, I do have one quick question.
I'm sorry, Councilman Betts, is that you? Hang on one second,
Yes.
please.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Councilwoman Shaw, did you have a follow-up? Okay, thank you. Councilman Betts.
So whereas there's ambiguity, why isn't we just able to send them to DCP and let them make that choice? Because they still have to oversight it. They still have to look at that.
DCP does not verify ownership and control. Because ownership and control, just like residency, just like income, is one of the definitions that determines someone's social equity status, which is what the council is responsible for. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor?
Can you do a roll call vote, please, Madam Chair?
Sure.
And this is basically the accepting the recommendation of Cohen Resnick on denial.
Correct.
For this particular category of folks, because we took care of the other categories.
Correct.
Good.
Okay.
Question for you before we vote. Is it a requirement to have at the final license for owning? Is not one of the requirements?
I don't understand your question, Councilman Betts.
At the end, when they go and get their license, right? Owner and control, isn't that a requirement for them to see that also to get the license?
Ownership and control is a definition that qualifies someone as a social equity applicant. The Social Equity Council is responsible for verifying that someone is a social equity applicant based on their income, their residency, and the ownership and control of their business. That is the verification process. DCP.
So once it goes to DCP, could you explain that to me just a little bit before we move forward? Like once it goes to DCP, what happens then? What do they look at?
DCP looks at several things. As part of the provisional licensure, they will be conducting the background check for this particular license type, the background check. And then once that is passed, they will issue a license upon payment of the fee.
Provisional.
So I just it just doesn't sit well with me. And then when I look online and I see the applicant and ownership control, some things say if available, but for full license, they need to have that. So that's confusing to me.
Okay. Any further discussion? I will call the roll. Councilman Betts.
No.
I vote in favor. Councilman Gaddis.
Yes, 10 times.
Councilwoman Gordon.
No.
Councilman Jefferson.
Yes.
Councilman Lehman.
Yes.
Councilwoman Name.
Yes.
Councilman Pelka.
Yes.
Councilwoman Shaw. You're on mute. I'm sorry. Thank
Yes.
you. Councilman Shirley.
Yes.
Councilwoman Valeries.
Yes.
And I believe that is everyone. I do not see Councilman Walton on here. Right. Thank you very much. Motion is passed. At this, yes, Councilwoman Shaw. You're on mute.
I'm wondering if the chair would entertain a motion to change the order of the committee reports.
Absolutely.
All right.
Would you like to go first?
Well, no, well, there's no update for finance, so we can get that
Okay.
out of the way. But no, I'm hoping that the bylaws chair would be willing to go first, only because I have a number of comments there and I have to check out of my hotel in like 13 minutes.
I was just sending you an email to
Absolutely.
make sure I get your question, so I'm happy to go first, but I
Sure.
don't know if we need to cover executive director's report. Is there anything pertinent on there that requires any type of voting?
I think given Councilwoman Shaw's questions, I'd like to cover this first. So let's
Sure.
move to governance, excuse me.
Awesome. Well, I'll then kick it off. I know, as Councilwoman Shaw mentioned, one of the items on the docket is bylaws. So we had discussed these in the last council meeting that the governance committee is putting together and reviewing bylaws in partnership with Attorney Matravy. And so we went through them. There were a couple of things we wanted to tweak, and then what was shared out with the full council was recommended for approval from the governance committee. So I did get a few questions I think we were able to address and tweak ahead of this meeting, but Councilwoman Shaw, I believe you have some questions, so we'll dive right in.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. So I'll start with just kind of the kind of what I believe are typographical errors or areas that can be readily addressed. So in section 2.1 of the draft, reference is made to an article. It says Article 11 section, and then it doesn't have the section number. So I believe that section needs to be included. It's Article 11, section blank of the state constitution. So we just need to insert that. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Under 6.2, section 6.2, reference is made to evaluation of the bylaws at least every 3 years. I believe you want to reference the frequency during those 3 years. So maybe at least once every 3 years. And in the subsequent, the second section of that, the second sentence of that section should begin with a capital: bylaws and associated policies. And the last kind of technical comment is under Article 8. There is reference to all of the standing committees of the SEC with the exception of finance. Curious to know if that was an intentional omission.
Let me just pull that piece up. And Attorney Matravy, I believe you're on. If you have any comments on that as well, please feel free to step in.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Shaw, could you point me to the right article where you in section 8?
It just doesn't have finance committee and their sort of definition written in there. So I think she was just wondering why that was left out in terms of purpose statements and tasks.
It's under Article 8.
Oh, we'll include it. We'll include it. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I believe the governing documents that this board acted on or this council acted on back in September include a definition of the scope of the committee's work. If you need it, Attorney Matrevi, I'd be happy to share it. All right, so those are the technical comments. I do have other questions. Going back, reference is made to an attendance requirement beginning in January of 2023. Curious to know the rationale for the delayed implementation of that attendance requirement.
So we did discuss and vote on a attendance sort of requirement about 3 council meetings ago that we're following. I think this was just an update and add to it and start, but Attorney Matrevi, I think you were jumping in.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So the reason why the delay is because there's also a law, Bill 5329, which was passed in this past legislature session. Basically, that has created also the same requirement. So we put that time over there just to be in harmony with the law, so that the council member have time to prepare themselves for that.
So I would disagree that we ought to delay implementation of the attendance requirement. This body has been in effect for nearly a year. I don't think it's necessary to delay that. It's very important that there be consistent participation, which is a matter we've discussed as a council. So I would respectfully suggest that the application of that section apply upon approval of the council and not be delayed until January of 2023.
Understood, council member. We could make the amendment. The council could still continue and vote subject to that amendment and the second amendment that you propose.
And respectfully, I would ask the chair of the governance whether she would accept that amendment.
I don't have any issues with that amendment. I'd accept it.
Okay, thank you. Section 7.4, and I just have 2 more comments. So section 7.4 of the bylaws make reference to conflicts of interest. Curious to know if that tracks the code of ethics to which members of this council and state employees are bound, which would extend those conflicts to spouses and immediate family members.
Through you, Madam Chair. I believe so. Sorry, I thought it was a question for me.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Attorney Matrevi, go ahead.
So is that a confident answer?
Yes, it is a confident answer. It is a confident answer because we actually use we prepared the SEC statement before we even work on this session. So we make sure it's in harmony with the statement that we prepared prior to that. Yeah.
So to be clear, any spouse or immediate family member of a member of the Social Equity Council would not be permitted to have an ownership stake in a cannabis business or any other scenarios that are explicitly set forth in this bylaw, correct?
Correct. The extent that is the same thing that is said in the Public Act 21-1 on section 51 is the same provision that we try to put here for the sake of consistency.
Okay. Terrific. And my last comment, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the council for indulging me as I go through this. The last is a matter, I don't have a strong feeling about this one way or the other, but section 3.5, which speaks to signature authority, it indicates that the chair and executive director shall have signature authority. I have seen, and there are a lot of different approaches to this, but I've seen situations where the executive director could have signature authority up to a threshold amount for administrative ease, and any contracts or agreements over a certain amount would require both signatures or the chair's signature. So I'm just wondering if that was something considered. Like I said, I don't feel like this needs to be changed, other than just curious to know if you considered bifurcating the circumstances under which signatures would be required.
We did not consider it, and I would actually check in with Chairwoman Comer to see if there was anything that you had previously discussed, but I don't think we've discussed anything or had anything in place in terms of any type of signing authority because of the sort of different layers of approval that do go in terms of checks and balances. And I don't think any other council members or on the governance committee had brought it up either.
That would be a policy decision. That doesn't have to be in the bylaws, right? We just make it a policy if it's some limits to what the executive director can sign off on. It's just, I don't necessarily think we have to state it specifically. We just have to basically create a policy.
Okay, that represents the sum of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments on the bylaws? If none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the bylaws with the kind of addition of the missing information that Councilwoman Shaw brought up, specifically to section 2, adding in the section number to Article 11, and then section 6, referencing the review once every 3 years and correcting the capitalization.
So move.
I think
Councilman Shirley
Councilman-
seconded.
Second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining? Chairman Corr, I think I always take your job there on the vote, so feel free to jump in.
No, you're fine. All righty. Motion carries. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Chairwoman Name and Attorney Matrebi. Next, we will move to the Workforce Committee. Chairwoman Valeries.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the Workforce Committee has been working on the approval process, the review and approval process for the workforce development plans. A RFP was issued out of the Social Equity office under Ginny Wright, and we received back the responses to the request for quotes for a outside entity to review the workforce development plans based on the criteria and the scoring rubric that this council has previously approved. The bids closed for that yesterday around at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so considering the fact that we have many applications that need those workforce development plans reviewed very quickly, we would like to hold a special meeting of the Workforce Development Committee to review the responses and choose and to make a recommendation back to the council on who would be reviewing those work plans. So I think that's something that's fairly urgent at the moment that could potentially hold up the process if we don't move forward on that. So today we'd like to ask the council if we can have a special workforce committee meeting. And then I believe Chair Comer, we would then have another special meeting of the council to approve prior to our next planned meeting. Is that the case?
That's my understanding. I believe we have a tentative date on the calendar.
Okay, that would be great. And so from there, once those initial amounts of workforce plans are reviewed, the other licensing types besides the cultivators will be coming in a trickle. And so we would be able to have an easier time, I think, keeping up with the planning reviews of those in subsequent rounds of applications. Do we need to take a vote on that, Chair Comer, or are we ready to just state that we're okay to have the special meetings?
Before I answer your question, Councilman Jefferson, because I don't know. Yes.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valeries, I'm unclear as to the impact that a negative rating, for example, on a workforce development plan from a given entity will have on their licensing, have on them moving forward. Can you basically explain how that works?
Yes, I think to your point is that we really need to be clear in the guidance document that we provide to the reviewers. We really don't want to penalize people for not being able to maybe subsequently answer, substantively answer some of the questions based on the fact that there isn't a lot of resources currently available in Connecticut. And so that will be coming online. So we want to make sure that we're being fair to their evaluation and understanding the intent for them to provide effective workforce development programming and opportunities for people to have incumbent worker training to move up the career ladders within their respected industries is important. And we will definitely make sure that we have some very good guidance to the reviewers.
And how soon do you expect the review process to begin? Will it begin, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
I think the review process can begin as soon as the council approves the organization that will be doing the review.
Thank you.
I think when we look at it, it'll be kind of similar to that, to what the process is that we just went through. There's a list of criteria, and then there's a scoring rubric associated with that. In the near future, we will be developing more information and training and develop a webinar to help people put together their workforce development plans and provide some additional resources. That has not been done yet because there really isn't anything to point them to at this point in time. So as we develop more materials and more programs, it will be easier to provide additional guidance and information to applicants. And that's why I think we need to be very careful that we don't penalize people who are early in the process here, as long as that their intent is there and they can't point to specific programming. I think that's more than acceptable at this point. We also are posting a position for the workforce development coordinator to come on board. This person will be paid for by the Social Equity Council and will be I will be supporting them through the Office of Workforce Strategy in coordination with the Social Equity Council and the DECD's role with the council. So we'll be able to really have a full-time resource helping us pull together programming. There is some guidance set out by USDOL. We do need to be very careful in how we roll out programming and who is available to support that. Any federal dollars are not able to be used to support cannabis in any way, shape, or form. So if we look at the existing workforce development system that's put in place by the federal WIOA requirements, that's all federal dollars. So we're going to need to be very careful if an entity such as a workforce board or an American Job Center is funded in part or wholly by federal dollars, then they would not be able to support any of the cannabis work that we're doing unless we pay them to do that administrative work aside from what they get from federal dollars. So that's something that we're just getting additional clarity and guidance from USDOL, and we'll be making sure that we follow all of those requirements for that purpose.
Madam Chair, may I?
Jefferson, yeah.
When will we have that clarity? Because they seem to be the best entities that we have in place to do some of the work we're talking about. We need the job training. I understand the UConns of the world and other institutions could assist, but we're talking about these councils who've been around forever and who have the expertise. Tell me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we received some verbal and written guidance from USDOL last week. And we have a meeting on the books, trying to find it in my calendar. I believe it's next week or the week after to have a more pointed conversation. I do know that the workforce boards are interested in supporting these programs. And we also have several community colleges and private colleges who are interested in developing programming in the different areas that we're looking for. So there's a lot of work kind of being done in the background on these programs, and we just need to understand the rules and requirements for scaling those programs and delivering them so that we're not, again, we're being very deliberate and not ensuring any federal dollars are used to support the development, implementation, or administration of any cannabis programming.
My last question, any communication with our federal legislators to determine where the federal government is at relative to cannabis and the federal laws governing cannabis? Do you have any indication? I know that's a big question, but it's an important one.
That is a big question. I don't think that I can really answer that at this moment, because I think anything that has to do with the cannabis industry, because it's federally not approved, that there can be no touching of federal dollars to the cannabis industry. So that is, primarily why we can't move cannabis out of the state from one state to the other as part of those rules and regulations. So I really have no idea when that may change.
Thank you.
If it will.
Additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Chairwoman Valeries.
Thank you.
Next, we move to the Outreach Committee and Chairwoman Gordon.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. So today we will be, and Councilwoman Alverio had a death in the family, so she's not here today. And so for clarity, this is her wheelhouse, and I'm feeling my way through this one, but Wilson is here to help us out. Today, we're going to be making a decision on a logo for the Social Equity Council for all of our communications. I will kick it to Wilson, who can just present what our options are. I have been very hands-off because this is Marilyn's wheelhouse, and I'm like, whatever you guys think is perfect. So I guess Chairwoman, I guess we could just kind of do what were the numbers, 1 or 2 determination, which one people like better. And then we can kind of have what we're going to be using on all communication moving forward. So Wilson, if you can share your screen, I think that might be the best way for us to just see what our options are. And Councilman Jefferson, is that a question for me or, okay, go ahead.
You're on mute, Councilman Jefferson. Councilman Jefferson, you're on mute.
I apologize. Is it necessary for us to make that decision today? Look, I'm not, saying that we're not going to be pleased with what we will see, but is it absolutely necessary for us to make a decision today? Can we offer some additional logo choices? I mean, is it written in stone? Do we have to make that decision today?
Chairwoman, I imagine that we could get feedback, right? I don't think, I mean, the only thing is the longer we take, the longer it takes for us to have a logo, which is not necessarily the most pressing thing in the world. I'd rather us get it right than not have one. As I said, for those of you who this is your wheelhouse, I am leaning on you to help make this decision. We could write a Social Equity Council in red pen over the top of anything if it were my determination. So I wouldn't say there's no real reason why we have to decide today. I think we can welcome any comments and thoughts or feedback here. Councilman Gaddis?
Listen, whatever logo you want to run with, I'm cool. I could care less about logos. I just want to get our industry up and running. I could care less about logos. I think you should let my daughter do the logo. She would do a great logo, by the way. Just saying.
Have her send us an application, but I'll just quickly add, we do have a lot of things on standby from a communication outreach, which in my opinion is important for us to get out there in terms of letting people know about the mission, everything that we're doing. And so we are.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairwoman, but when are we gonna get all this going? Every meeting we hear about things we got waiting and ready, and it gobbles up real estate on the clock. I think I aged like two years in 2 hours. So if we could just do things between meetings to get things moving along, that would be helpful. Because I don't really care about logos.
Yeah, so actually during the outreach committee had a series of logos that were created by Camelo Communications, and they narrowed it down to two, in large part because we wanted to have the full council's feedback and opinion on them. And I certainly appreciate the fact that you are indifferent. But I think that there are council members who may want to have some input into what our brand looks like. So rather than looking at 6, which then got down to 4, and now we're at 2, we have 2 so that we could have council members at least have eyes and input into the final decision. I hope that makes sense.
Hello?
Councilwoman
Wilson,
Gordon.
I'm just kicking it over to you to share your screen so everybody can see them. I think that's the easiest way.
Absolutely.
Unless there was any other question. Sorry, I don't want to cut off discussion. Okay.
I just did, for everybody's sake as well, just want to clearly, indicate some of the thinking that did go behind this, because, logos are important. It is important for us to create something that's identifiable with who we are, and also represents who we are, reinforces that. So the logos we have here, we did look at the mission, make sure that the mission is part of this and that they're strong and clean fonts. The colors, we picked very deliberate as well, a 2-color logo, which allows us to be versatile with our applications. I actually have a couple of applications. You can see that the logo options as well as kind of how it might look. And then again, something that's cost effective to reproduce. So with that, I'll just quickly go into the 2 concepts. This was option 1. Again, we had 6 different concepts and we've narrowed them down to 2. Here, obviously, we see the 2-color design, very clear, indication of who we are with the icon being the cannabis leaf, Connecticut and Social Equity Council in there. So, in terms of how, we might see this, say, for example, on a business card, a hat, a cup, just kind of different execution so we can see how it might play out in terms of its application, in a polo. The second option is a little bit different. We took a little bit more of a horizontal format to this. Again, Connecticut social equity is bolded in blue in a different color. So I think that comes out very clearly, as well as the cannabis leaf. And again, different from the first style, but something that again is very versatile, that can be used in many different applications. So again, this is how this might look in terms of different executions from a promotional perspective. So here are the 2 side by side. So I guess I'll kick it over from a formality perspective in terms of how this needs to be voted on. But I thought we just put these here side by side so you could see them as well, and focus on those as you vote.
Okay, so Councilwoman Shaw and then Councilwoman Valeries.
Thank you. And I like these logos. I do think, though, that the name Social Equity Council doesn't really, for most lay people, capture what it is the Social Equity Council is tasked with doing. And that is assuring that there is really, I think of concepts and images which relate to justice in the cannabis market. So, so to pair a cannabis leaf with social equity might not convey that we really are about establishing equity in the cannabis business in Connecticut. So I'm wondering if the committee, and by the way, in no means am I a marketing expert, I'm just Jane Q Public here, but I'm wondering, there are times when there's like a byline which kind of explains a little bit more. So I'm curious to know if there was consideration of Connecticut's Social Equity Council bringing fairness to cannabis business in Connecticut or something, something a little bit more explanatory, to kind of make clear what our mission is, what our brand is, what our objectives are.
Yeah, to your point, that's the job of a tagline, not necessarily a logo. When you think of Verizon or Pepsi, it doesn't tell you what it is.
Right.
The tagline and then its application will do that. So, we did have some options where we kind of played with the equal sign and either in the leaf or with the E, but there was some discussion about how, equality and equity are not exactly the same thing. And so we kind of abandoned that idea, but we did think about some of those other kinds of a way to do that, but we think that in its application, its use as well as a tagline, can alleviate those concerns that you might have.
So I would just, in closing, just favor some kind of tagline as part of the logo, obviously not very wordy, but that would be somewhat descriptive of what it is we endeavor to do.
Councilwoman Valeries?
Thank you. And thank you, Councilwoman Shaw. I agree. A tagline will be a great addition to the logo. Sometimes you include it and sometimes you don't, depending on what you're using it for. I really like both of these, but I like a couple different elements of each. So I really like the little bit of extra detail that is in the circle concept number 1 on the leaf. And that maybe if you brought that little bit of detail into the leaf on option number 2, it would just add a little bit more of like that crispness. But I really like how social equity is large in the second logo and really brings out the intent of what we're trying to do. So those would just be my comments. And other than that, I really like the colors that you've chosen and the font. I think they're both really nice options, but I tend to think of option number 2 a little bit more striking, and just really like the detail of a little bit more on the leaf on option number 1. Thank you.
Further?
Councilman Jefferson?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with comments made by both councilwomen on Shaw and Valerie's regarding the tagline, but I think the tagline as Wilson laid out can be applied at some other point. And maybe we don't have to have the tagline on a hat or on a canister, but it could be on the letterhead itself, not necessarily on every item that's created by the Social Equity Council, but a tagline is a nice touch. I don't understand the circle, although I love I like option 2 better than I like option 1. But I don't necessarily, that's where Councilwoman Valeries and I might disagree. I don't even understand the point of the circle, but I like this, looks a little cleaner here on option 2. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
And by the way, I do think logos are very, very important. I think your brand is exceptionally important, when you're trying to promote who you are.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. Just to clarify my comments, I also agree that the circle doesn't need to be added, but I like the white lines that are kind of delineate the leaves in that and add a little bit of detail.
Oh, I see the white leaves. I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you for the clarification, because that might have not come through in my comments.
Yeah, we looked at that as an icon as well. You think about, there's places where you might just use an icon, right? Say on Facebook, you have the little, avatar, for example. So we looked at that as a way to also have, an image. The circle isn't symbolic of anything. It's just a creative, aspect that gives some contrast to the leaf. And actually you see the, those white lines in between the leaves a little bit stronger when there's some contrast to it. So we might lose some of that perhaps if we lose the circle, but just wanted to mention that the circle wasn't symbolic of anything specific. It was just a creative element.
Additional comments?
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was trying to get off mute and it wasn't letting me. So I think for process, and since there's lots of thoughts, for clarity, Madam Chair, I would suggest that can we vote via email, or would we have to call a special meeting? If Wilson could kind of take this feedback and create maybe 2 other options. I don't think we need many other options. If we could create 2 other options and I do agree that I don't necessarily want us to wait all the way until August to make this decision to move forward. If it could be like a quick special meeting, or if everyone wants to take a look at them via email and provide us some feedback, that would be helpful. I'm not sure what the right process is here to move forward, so we're not stalling a whole month and we can get moving here.
Can I just ask
Sure.
a clarifying question? Are you looking for two separate options? Or are you looking for the edit modifications of these two based on some of the feedback that was just presented?
Whatever makes the most sense. I don't know. Whatever makes the most, if it's one that incorporates, I think there was agreement on the logo. The one I'm not sure. I think the tagline is a little bit more of a bigger conversation, and I don't necessarily want to hold up the logo while we figure out what the tagline is, because I'm not sure we know what the tagline should be. And that's a conversation I think that the outreach committee should have and present you with some options. But I'd like to move forward with the logo, if everyone's okay with that, while the outreach committee or outreach and marketing, because I'd love to bring Marilyn into this conversation, comes up with some thoughts around the tagline that we could share with everyone, if everyone's okay with that. Councilwoman Bowers, is that your hand still up, or did you have a new question?
Yes,
Okay, sorry.
I did. Just quickly, a suggestion, if I may, if we're having a special meeting for the workforce plan in the next week, then maybe we could incorporate the feedback and vote on the logo if it could potentially be ready by then, and we don't have to hold up either one of those votes or have two separate meetings.
So we do have a special council meeting tentatively scheduled. So, which was for the purposes of additional reviews as they come forward. So my suggestion would be that we keep that meeting date, and if there are reviews, great, and if they're not, then we can cover the business that you stated, the workforce development plan and the logo discussion.
And when is that meeting, Chairwoman?
I believe that it is the 21st, but I will ask the SEC team to confirm that.
Thank you. It is scheduled tentatively for the 21st of July.
Okay. I think, Wilson, is that sufficient time? I don't want to put you, okay, perfect.
Yeah, assuming we're talking about some modifications of these based on the feedback that was provided, not too new. I mean, we do have, like I said, other options. Like I said, we've gone through already some internal iterations with the outreach committee. And so the thought was present two finalists, if you will, before this board. So I just wanted to get clarification if that indeed was the case. It was the edits of this, or whether we're going to resurrect maybe some other options. If we have to create two completely new options, then the 21st might be a little too soon.
So I believe we're just making edits to these. I don't think we're starting over from scratch.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Jefferson?
Yeah, I would just offer to Wilson's point, is it possible for us to simply vote on the two of these and then make the edit to one of them, the one that we vote on? Or do we have to see edits to both? Is that possible?
I think Chairwoman, I'm leaning on you. If folks are leaning to option, I think it's cleaner if we just vote on the right one. I think it's just a little easier, because I don't know if we're gonna fall where half of us are gonna like one or half of us are gonna like two, and then might be one with edits versus two with edits. But I don't know. What's easier, Chairwoman, or better?
I think you could vote on one. I think it's fine either way. If there's consensus on.
Okay, I think that might be easier. If there's consensus on one, and then we'll just get edits to that one, maybe that's easier. All right. Do I make the motion? I think we just have to do show of hands or on one versus two. Does that work? I can't see every, Wilson, if you could stop sharing yours, or maybe we need the screen share so you can see everything. All right, maybe we'll just figure this out. What's the easiest way here?
So
To
I-
you, Madam Chairwoman, I move to vote on option 2.
Is
Madam
there a
Chairwoman.
second?
In that,
I second that.
Okay. Do I say all in favor or do you? Okay, all in favor of option 2?
aye.
I,
Noes? Okay, option 2, it is. And then Wilson, we'll just make the edits, and if anyone, we'll just share the edits, and if that, just to make sure that that captured what everyone thought, or that captures the feedback, and we can just go keep working with option 2. Perfect. Thank you. Apologies for that being more cumbersome than it needed.
No worries. Thank you, Councilwoman Gordon. I'm going to jump back up on the agenda to, is Councilwoman name still here? I actually
I
don't.
am here. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh, okay,
jumping off
great.
camera.
To, for Accelerator Committee, and then we will round out with Councilman Shirley.
Great. So a quick update from the Accelerator Committee. We are at the kind of home stretch of reviewing our applications that had come in for the Accelerator program, a operator for that. We had 3 finalists that we did interview last week, and there are just a couple of sort of working points we're hoping to have nailed away in time for this meeting. But I believe since we do have a special meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks, our goal is to have a final presentation for the full council to approve at the special meeting. Any questions?
I have a question. Can I see your
Yes.
baby?
Do a quick sneak peek. She's getting real fussy. Say hi. She's overwhelmed.
Awesome, thank you.
Lots of, it's definitely Brady Bunch screens for her today.
Appreciate it. Thank you. If there's no discussion on Councilwoman Knight or Chair Naeem's presentation, we will finish up with Councilman Shirley and the Policy Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Policy Committee had a special meeting to discuss a document which I think you've all received, which describes the provisions and prohibitions for the transfer of SEC licenses during the restricted period. And I think the key issue, of course, is what is the restricted period, and that's the restricted period begins with the issuance of the provisional license, and it goes through the issuance to a final license and 3 years thereafter. During the restricted period, the social equity licensee may not enter into any contract or agreement that would in fact transfer the sale or the legal beneficial ownership or control of a social equity license. An approved owner may sell as transfer ownership or control of a license during the restricted period if approved by the Social Equity Council in accordance with the procedures in section 21A 420H-3. The Social Equity Council shall approve such a transfer if the social equity licensee demonstrates that A, the owner has died or has a condition that interferes with the approved owner's ability to operate the social equity license, such as illness, loss of skill due to aging, emotional disorder, or mental illness. Or if a transfer is made to another individual who has been approved by the council or as an approved owner. Prior to any sale, the approved owner notifies the SEC, Social Equity Council, of the intent using the prescribed forms. Notification includes all documents for the Social Equity Council to assess whether the change is permissible under these policies. Notification will include documents for the Social Equity Council to assess whether the change is permissible under what would then be the current criteria, including change in DIAs. Council shall approve or deny the request or transfer within 90 days of receipt of notification. During the restricted period, no change in ownership shall be complete without the review of the Social Equity Council. And lastly, the Audit and Enforcement paragraph, SEC may require a licensee to furnish documents to ensure that the approved terms of ownership and control are maintained, and such social equity licensee or approved owner shall make documents available for inspection within 3 days of request. Documents will be provided in electronic format unless that's not commercially practical. The council or its designees may conduct investigations regarding changes, requests, and to confirm the request. The executive director shall complete a report containing evidence of a violation of the regulations of Connecticut state agencies. This will be referred to the Department of Consumer Protection. The Department of Consumer Protection may issue fines up to $10 million for violations. So the policy committee is recommending that we accept, recommending to the council that we accept these provisions as stated. Madam Chair, is there shall I ask for a motion?
Second, I'll second what you just put forward as a motion.
Thank you, Councilman Gaddis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
We skipped over the question part. but
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, you're right. Are there any questions? Okay. Any abstentions or any nay votes? Then the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Shirley. I believe we have covered all the committee business. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none, I want to thank this council for all their time and attention, and as well as the SEC team. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Bye.